This has been one of our big stories this morning. Edward Snowden could be headed for Ecuador. That's despite the U.S. State Department calling on countries in the Western Hemisphere not to let him travel through or take refuge in foreign countries. The man who leaked top-secret documents about U.S. surveillance programs fled Hong Kong Sunday and is believed to be in Moscow right now. Ecuador's foreign minister confirming this in a tweet. His country has received a request for asylum from Snowden, rather from his lawyers. The U.S. and Ecuador have a joint extradition treaty, but it does not apply to politically based offenses. U.S. prosecutors filed charges against Snowden Saturday, accusing him of violating espionage laws and demanding his return to the United States. To keep talking about this, Jay Bavisi joins us, President and CEO of EC Council, an information security accreditation agency. He joins us around the desk here at the SGX, usually based in the U.S., in Asia, though, to give talks on cybersecurity. And Jay, you described it to me very, very succinctly just seconds ago offline. When I asked you what EC Council does, you said, look, basically you guys provide cyber bodyguards for governments around the world and also training on how to basically keep their cyberspaces safe.
Absolutely. We create ethical hackers or penetration testers for not just government agencies but for large corporations across the world, Martin. And we do this by training the good guys the same skill and art that the bad guys have.
Right. So you show them, look, this is how the hackers do it. Right, and this is how you can stop it.
Exactly. That's the entire concept behind it.
Without giving too much away, without giving too much away, where do you stand on this whole Snowden case?
Well, I think that this is a very interesting moment. It defines one critical principle, and that is the changing taxonomy of war. If you look at traditional warfare, you will have a known assailant against a known victim. And you would know when a war starts. Yep. You know that that's an act of war, and you know when a war stops. Yeah. You would have Geneva Convention. You would understand what a white flag means, and if you have people that are injured, you have something called a Red Cross. Okay. Now you're talking about an unknown assailant with an unknown victim. You have unknown countries that may or may not be assisting you. You do not know exactly when war starts. You do not know exactly when war stops. There definitely is no international Red Cross.
So it sounds like those that drive Don Rumsfeld crazy.
I think it drives a lot of people crazy.
Yeah, okay.
But this is the issue, isn't it, Jay? I mean, those assailants, as he quite rightly pointed out, could be your own countrymen, could come from within the ranks of your own public. So how do you balance surveillance, public surveillance, with the rights of ordinary citizens? It seems to be a very fraught subject. I mean, out here, we don't really have countries that have a Data Protection Act. So what do you do?
Well, I think that's a very valid point. I think we need to separate a couple of segments of this entire case. First, we're talking of the United States. Now, in the United States, they've got a Bill of Rights. The Fourth Amendment protects the right to privacy as a constitutional right to Americans. That is not a constitutional right that's available to many citizens in Asian countries. So, as you correctly said, you've got to have. Well, I think that depends on individual demographic, individual countries. It depends on the actual cultural background. But one thing that's for sure that's going to change is the fact that the U.S. is now going to have to deal with adversaries, and if the adversaries belong to if the adversaries are countries in Asia, you're going to deal with countries where snooping around is perfectly common, legal, and perhaps even acceptable. But in the U.S., this case has shown is unacceptable because of the constitutional right. So you're going to be dealing with a very uneven terrain. This is going to be a nightmare for the U.S. government to deal with.
And the law, I mean, legal jurisdictions, cross-jurisdictions, I mean, this is going to be just absolutely messy, right? Because as you say, you know, if the originators happen to be out here in Asia, and these are states who say, well, look, what's the problem? I do this every day to my citizens. They don't complain because most of the time they don't even know about it. They don't even know whether they have the rights or not to basically ensure their own privacy.
Right. It's not just Asia, Martin. I mean, look at the GCHQ. Look at Great Britain. Yeah. Great Britain has been snooping around as has been commonly publicized. Yeah. The important factor that we need to understand, you know, what surprises me is that a lot of people are surprised. I mean, come on, 1950s, Ian Fleming, James Bond. Spying has been around forever. The only change now is that we are dealing with a cyber form. And I think what's unique about this case is that this is a spying activity against its own citizens in a country where privacy has been enshrined in the Constitution.
Yeah.
But otherwise, apart from that, I think what a lot of people need to recognize is that, very well, you might stop the NSA from spying on its citizens. You cannot stop foreign countries from spying.
This is not legitimate, what is happening.
Well, that, I think, is a matter of the law. I think that there's so many elements of the case that we do not know. All we know is what's published. And based on what is published, there are two sides of the case. There is the U.S. government that says, hey, completely legitimate because we are operating under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, right? And we have an order from Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. But the counter-argument of that is, wait a minute, that can never be legal. It's unconstitutional. Congress cannot pass a law and allow this to happen.
Okay, so this raises an interesting question because you do what you do as a business. You make money from it. This is your company, but you're trained as a lawyer. So let me ask you, Snowden, is he a traitor or is he a hero like Julian Assange says?
Martin, any lawyer that chooses cybersecurity as a field is a very bad lawyer. Never count on his advice. But based on that, I will tell you that I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be decided by the courts of the U.S. I think the courts of public opinion, have their opinion. But I think that we cannot decide on this case very quickly. I think there's so many documents that he has had in possession that has not been released, right? We're not aware of exactly what are the court orders, because one of the unique things about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court is that any of the orders that they provide are not public information. So you do not have an understanding of what was allowed by the courts, whether what was allowed was constitutional or unconstitutional. But the bottom line, at the end of this case, what we have to accept is that Asian countries have to be aware that cybersecurity is a risk that is here to stay, and that they have to find a solution to this. And that insider threat, Sri, directly to your point, is one of the common factors that we cannot avoid. You can have the most technologically advanced solutions that you have for your company. All it takes is one person. Okay. This is the U.S. National Security Agency, and you have this huge mammoth organization that has fallen a victim to its own. Yeah. And I think this is a lesson for Asian countries to accept that nothing is safe in cyber.
Indeed. All right, Jade, good to talk to you. Appreciate the time.